because that was actually one of, I feel, one of the more fundamental things that he said, one of those more fundamental promises that he made during his campaign, is that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan would end. Now, what do you feel changed, or what was it, a mindset change on his part? What happened?
Well, I'll be blunt. I'm not a fan of Barack Obama. Okay, I'll say that right up front. I believe he'll say anything he needs to say to get elected. I believe he said that to get elected, and I don't really believe that if he makes a promise like that, he's got to hold to it, and he's really trying to hold to it. If he said we'd get out by the end of 2012, well, we'll have to just wait and see. Now, granted, that is a year and a half away. That's a lot of time, but the thing is, Americans, and then this whole thing about, oh, well, we're not in combat in Iraq. I'm shifting to Iraq. We're not in combat in Iraq. The soldiers that are there are advise and assist brigades.
Well, what does that mean?
What is that? What's that? It's the same soldiers. They're the same units. You're just giving them a different name. And when in Iraq,
but doesn't that mean that the United States is actually moving towards transferring responsibility?
It's semantics. When a soldier, if I was the parent of a soldier that died in Iraq, a year after the president said that we were not in combat in Iraq, I'd be saying, how did my son die? Who killed him? Did he die in a training accident? You said we weren't in combat. Was he hit by a truck? We're in combat. It's just semantics. Obama's just saying that we're not in combat. You know, if the sky is blue, I could say it was pink. I'm just saying it's pink, but it's blue. And the fact is that we are in combat in these places. The reason why they're taking so long is because our presidents, Bush and Obama, Bush before Obama, now Obama, will not make the tough decisions. And the tough decision is this.
Well, let's back up a little before you get there. I definitely want to hear what you say. But what role does American media outlets play in that? Because that's what we hear here in the United States. We live here in Washington, D.C. We're constantly bombarded with the same news saying, okay, no more combat troops in Iraq. That's it. Like, what the United States have left on the ground are these advise and assist troops.
Because the mainstream media is allowing Barack Obama to get away with that statement.
From both sides, do you think?
Well, you know, I think both sides, actually, yeah. Thomas Ricks, the guy that wrote the book Fiasco, a great book on the Iraq War, when Obama came out with that comment that we're no longer in combat, we have advise and assist brigades, and Tom Ricks is a big military correspondent and you know, very well-known, reputable guy, and he goes, well, what does that mean? A soldier is a soldier is a soldier. I mean, a soldier in Iraq is in combat. I don't care what anybody says. And he's right. I totally agree with what he said. And you know, nobody is in the media per se is saying, well, what does that mean? What's an advise and assist brigade? What's that? You know, is the unit patch changing on the 10th Mountain Division or whatever? You know, no, it's the same. They're still soldiers with rifles. They're just going to shoot to defend themselves. I mean, it's just semantics. We either have soldiers there that are in combat, or we don't have soldiers there, and if they're not there, they're not in combat. And then, of course, the other thing is, and I must say this, nobody bats an eye, nobody even questions how many contractors are in Iraq and Afghanistan. If we have 100,000 soldiers in Afghanistan, we've got 300,000 contractors.
Why isn't more? Why don't we see more about that? Why
they don't wear uniforms. They don't count. It's only soldiers that count. And contractors are over there to make money for the companies that employ them.
What effect does that have? What implications does that have in the United States pulling out? If there's vested interest in money being made by American contractors, what implications does that have for the United States pulling out?
Oh, they don't want us to pull out. If you're a company that has, and see, here's the thing, during World War II and all that, they made boats and planes and bullets. Now contractors also supply mercenaries. They supply civilians with camouflage, with khaki trousers with combat pouches on them, baseball caps wrapped in a tight curl, golf shirts, and a goatee, and they all look the same, and sunglasses, and they are fully capable of conducting a military operation, and also they're fully capable, without any proper oversight, of murdering people like the Blackwater contractors did at Nister Square in Baghdad in September of 2007, a week after I left. And because they're contractors and not soldiers, they're not subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the military law of our country. And because they're Americans in a foreign country, they're not subject to the jurisdiction of that country. So what ends up happening? They get on a plane and fly back home and melt away. And there's no control. And I have to also say this. We talk about Iraq and Afghanistan and the soldiers and the 10,000 soldiers being withdrawn and all that. It's all politics. It's all politics.
Now, you're saying it's all politics.
Because I have to say this, because this is really important. It's so easy for our country to get involved in wars nowadays because presidents don't bother getting a declaration of war from Congress, which they're required to do under the Constitution. And they send a fraction of the soldiers needed to fight the war and 3 times the number of contractors. And the American people are no more the wiser. All they think of is, we've got X number of soldiers over there. No one tells them there's X times 3 number of contractors over there too.
So when you're saying that it's all politics, it's no secret you're conservative, worked under the Bush administration. When we see a government official like then Secretary Gates back in 2010 saying that Iraq is not ready for the United States to leave, is that because Iraqi forces aren't ready, or combat forces aren't ready to protect themselves from something, or is it because U.S. interests are not ready to wrap up and go? What do you think outweighs what?
It's 2 reasons. The reason why we're not ready to leave is because, again, I was about to say a moment ago, it comes down to a choice of one of 2 things for both Iraq and Afghanistan, okay? And also one of the reasons why they're taking so long is because we've got both of them, not just one. And we don't have enough troops. We're not sending enough troops over there. The choice is this. I'll get back to your point in just a second. Either go in with overwhelming force and finish the job, or don't go in at all. Vietnam, McNamara was the Secretary of Defense. Limited engagement.
I did want to ask you, because that's a parallel that you've drawn in your book, is the Vietnam parallel.
What is that? Well, we're doing the same thing all over again with these 2 conflicts. Gates said we should not pull out of Iraq. You just mentioned that. Gates said we should not be pulling out of Iraq. I was there. The Iraqi army, modeled after the British army, they marched like British soldiers do. Granted, Saddam Hussein might have been a bad actor, but there was a standing army, and it was fairly disciplined. Not a match for our army, okay, but it was a standing army. It was disbanded by Paul Bremer with the stroke of a pen. I was there. The Iraqi army, when I was there 4 years ago, was a joke.
So let's talk about the failure itself. In your book, you mentioned that Paul Bremer, maybe not single-handedly, but it's America's fault itself. America created the insurgency when Paul Bremer disbanded the army and the national police. Do you still think that's
Absolutely.
That's true?
There's no question in my mind. I got over there and I was attached to the Multinational Security Transition Command, Iraq, MNSTICI, long acronym, 6 letters. I was there as the real estate advisor to the Ministry of Defense. Why was I there? I was there because we were creating a brand new Iraqi army, recruiting Iraqi men off the street because Paul Bremer had disbanded the entire Iraqi army, the entire Iraqi National Police, which was an army, disbanded all of them. And where do those newly unemployed soldiers and policemen go, with their weapons, by the way, who now hate the United States because they no longer have a job and can feed their families? Ripe recruits for the insurgency. And I'm over there to find land and help the Iraqi Ministry of Defense, the new Ministry of Defense, construct camps and bases for the new Iraqi army. So not only did we invade Iraq with a fraction of the soldiers needed to do the job right on our own, just completely on our own, but then when he disbanded the Iraqi army and national police, there was no one there to help us maintain law and order. Donald Rumsfeld was asked, Mr. Secretary, before the invasion, don't you think we ought to send maybe about 4,000 U.S. Army military police over to Iraq to maintain law and order on the streets? No, we're not going to need them. That was his answer. That is a fact. I was told that by a person I won't name, who was a senior staffer in the U.S.
What's the mindset? What's the idea there?
Because he thought we would invade with 50, 100,000 troops. They had little American flags. They were going to give the Iraqi children. We would be welcomed in the street, and everything would be Pollyanna. And then Bremer, who was put in place of Jay Garner, says, without consulting with anybody, disbands the Iraqi army with the stroke of a pen. That's as close to single-handedly as possible. So we not only don't have enough soldiers to keep the country safe, there's no Iraqi army or national police. I mentioned before the interview began about the border between Iraq and Iran being like a sieve because the Ministry of Defense was the border, controlled the borders.
Let me ask you about objectives, because okay, you said you're not a supporter of President Obama. You did support President Bush before the election, during the election. Now, the war is the war. It's the same war that George Bush started. It's the same war that President Obama has inherited.
Absolutely.
How have the objectives of the war changed, if there ever were objectives? How did they change at the beginning of the war, and what are they now? This is another war that's being pulled for the long run, it seems.
If I just woke up, if I just came out of a coma that lasted 3 years, I'd say I would think George Bush was still the president. Nothing's changed. We're still involved in Iraq and Afghanistan. More American soldiers have died in Afghanistan since Barack Obama became the president than in all the preceding years prior.
So let me ask you this. If nothing's changed, and again, it's a question of objectives. It's kind of a two-parter since we are running out of time. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're seeing this rhetoric coming from the White House that is, let's see what happens in Iraq. We're going to pull out. But if Iraqi officials ask us to stay, we're going to stay. We're going to keep somewhere along the lines of 10,000 troops is what I heard. If they say that we need to stay, what's the underlying kind of motivation behind that sort of rhetoric? Do you think?
I really believe that it's a way to maintain. It's all a little bit of everything. Maintain a presence, but mostly pull out. But the other thing is, and I really believe this. And again, I may sound cynical, but I really believe it. The contractors, the company that supply contractors, are going to continue to make a killing in both in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a fact that the State Department, this has been published, the State Department is going to have 7, 10, 8,000 security contractors. That's a fancy term for mercenary. Civilian contractors providing security for the State Department at like 4 locations, 4 major cities throughout Iraq. Okay, so now the State Department is in the business of kind of conducting sort of semi-military operations with contractors, and not to mention all the other contractors that cook the food and drive the trucks and provide the fuel and all that kind of stuff. Iraq has become like a factory. It's a factory. It's a factory for war. It's a factory that churns out conflict so that the military-industrial complex can just keep on grinding away, and that companies can keep on generating money, selling bullets, selling cruise missiles, selling weapons, and supplying soldiers.
And unfortunately, we and I hate to cut you off. I know that I could use another hour with you to really get everything that I want to ask you. But I want to thank you again for being on the show, Mr. O'Brien. It's really been a pleasure. I want to thank again our guest, Mr. O'Brien. His book is America's Failure in Iraq. You can also find him at americasfailureinairaq.com. Thanks for tuning in. Again, my name is Manuel Rapido, and see you next time.